Morning, Sarah. How you doing? You all right?
Yes, thank you. You.
Thanks for joining us today. So, you're here to talk about kind of a project what you've been doing on Aintree. But before we do that, would you mind just explaining who you are and what Aintree Ward's about, please?
Okay, so I'm Sarah Foster. I've been a staff nurse at Rampton Hospital now for 22 years. Aintree Ward is one of 4 of the learning disability wards within the National High Secure Service based at Rampton Hospital. Back in April, we designed half of Aintree Ward to become the autism service. This is an autism-informed ward for patients that have either got the diagnosis of autism or would benefit from an autism-informed environment. And in the introduction of this service, I was also promoted to be the lead nurse for this service.
Smashing. Thanks ever so much. So, so you were kind of thought about while you were on the ward, you thinking about there was a particular project. Why was it needed? What was the issues? What were happening on Aintree at that time?
Okay, so the introduction of the autism service obviously raised a few questions about some of the environmental changes that we could make to make it more beneficial for our patient group. And we were always under the internal and external scrutiny, especially with the CTR system, the care and treatment reviews. And one of the big issues for any service such as ours is the use of restrictive interventions. And within the autism service, we had a patient that resided that had been in long-term segregation for a long number of years. And unfortunately, it was proving very difficult to move this individual on due to the restrictions caused by the long-term segregation. So it felt that with the introduction of the autism service and the changes that we were able to bring about with the environment, we could maybe look at changing this patient's opportunities and give him opportunities to spend more time out of segregation. So that's why the QI project was originally thought about, of ways that we could make it beneficial to this individual.
That sounds like a little bit also around the challenges that somebody becomes comfortable in that situation as well. Becomes used to that area, that's theirs, that's their own area, and it's quite protective and quite a good thing for them in some respects. Do you explore that?
I do believe that there's a belief from external parties looking in that the segregation was purely imposed by us as nursing staff and the MDT. Where to some extent this particular patient's use of segregation was actually his own personal choice. And we had a lot of issues around encouraging this individual to experience life outside of segregation, because as you said, he was very comfortable, he felt safe. So one of the challenges we had to overcome with this patient was, yes, there was a reason for the restrictions, but there was also a need to educate both staff and himself about the opportunities that would be made available to him if we could relax those hours of segregation. So we needed to work holistically with the whole MDT and every member of staff on the ward to give that consistency for the safety that patient felt in his room to be reflected outside of his room.
Yeah. So did you kind of come up with a specific aim for your project? What was your aim for that project?
So my initial aim was looking at the statistics of how much time he presently spent outside of segregation. My original plan was to increase that time by 50% between the start of the plan, which was in August, and the completion of the plan, which is now, which was January. So we are at the end point.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, so so you approached kind of it from a particular angle and used some of the quality improvement kind of methodology kind of things. What things did you find useful? What helped at that, and why?
Well, having an idea of what you want to achieve is one thing, but actually achieving it is a totally different thing. And what I found with the QI was a very systematic approach. By designing of the poster, looking at the aim, looking at your driver diagrams, it allowed me to put onto paper the thoughts that were whizzing round in my head, but show the natural progression of how that would actually work and what was needed to make that work. One of the advantages of using the QI poster style was the PDS cycles, PDSA cycles.
PDSA,
They were really beneficial because you could find while you were working through the project, something didn't quite work. And they gave you the opportunity to look at that and make those little tweaks that were necessary to bring about another change or enhance the project, without feeling that the project was actually failing. It gave you that freedom to see that they were part of an expectation of the project was to have these tweaks. And I think that was really helpful for myself leading the project, but also for everybody involved with the project to see how it was developing and actually show the progress through the post now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember talking to you about it where you talked about that team. Sometimes there was a particular PDSA cycle what you'd started and it didn't particularly feel like it had achieved what you thought it was going to do. And then you had to kind of talk about that with the team. Do you want to explain that a little bit, if that's okay?
Yeah, so as much as, like I say, a lot of this was in my head of what I wanted to achieve, and I'd written it down on paper, I hadn't, it would appear, communicated it correctly to the whole team. And their understanding of it wasn't as clear as I would have hoped. So what we found out with the results that we were seeing through the programme was that we weren't getting the results that I was expecting, and I couldn't understand initially why. So we managed, in the conversation with yourself, we stepped back, we had a look, and then we looked at what the communication style was working for staff and what wasn't. So we went back to the basics of explaining and actually taking time out, not just sending an email, but actually discussing it. We had reflective practice sessions with the staff team so they felt comfortable to discuss what concerns they had, because there was a lot of anxiety around this patient. This must be understood that this patient has spent the majority of his life under restrictive interventions. So to suddenly start saying that we needed to be more positive and reduce those interventions did cause anxiety throughout the team. And they hadn't had the same amount of time thinking about it that I had. So we did do the reflective practice sessions. I did some question and answer sessions with staff. We did anonymous emails so that they could actually raise concerns that they had, and then I could address them and communicate them better and get the staff more on board with what I was trying to do, which they did. They were brilliant. I can't fault them for their enthusiasm to bring this project to life.
Absolutely. And I suppose that kind of engagement that then helped the project to keep driving along as well, because it was that two-way process. You're involving them, you're listening to them, and that would have particularly, that sounded like it really helped to continue that sustainable project kind of thing, that it wasn't just something what was going to drop back and fall back to how you were doing it before. By explaining that helped.
No, I think having the conversations on a regular basis embeds it into normal routine. And I think that was really helpful, because once you start having those conversations as a norm, it starts to become what people do. You know, that did change behaviours, it did change routines, and getting that confidence throughout the whole staff team then gave the patient confidence that it was okay, that things were safe, because his staff were appearing more confident. They were comfortable to make decisions. They weren't just looking to myself or other leaders to make the decisions for them. They were actually quite comfortable to do it themselves. And that was supported. That was what I wanted. That was my end goal, was that everybody felt as confident as they could.
Yeah, great. So kind of getting on to kind of the results and the evaluation, you've said that kind of the end of the project's coming up now, in the sense of the project, the work's still going to continue. So how did that go then? What, you know, thinking about your aim, talking about 50% increase, how did you get, how are we going on?
It went totally off the chart. So my starting, so what we must understand about this patient is, as I said, long term, very difficult to engage in activities outside of his room, and his door was quite often locked for 23 and a half hours of the day. You know, it would be half an hour a day if we were lucky. So my goal was really to increase it to an hour, and I was kind of hoping that I could maybe push it to 2 hours as the project went on. However, he's now averaging 9 hours a day with his door unlocked. And that is purely down to the dedication of the staff team to see this through. We are going to continue, and my end goal is to actually now remove segregation from this patient. I'm in the process of writing a very robust management plan for how this will happen. But the whole hospital is aware of this QI project and have been very supportive of it. So I do feel that we will, within the next 3 to 6 months, be able to remove segregation completely, which asked me that 12 months ago, I wouldn't have seen that happening. And I do believe it is down to the formulation of the QI project and the fact that people could see success after success, and that encouraged staff to keep engaging with the project. And yeah, that's how we've ended up with the results we've got.
Yeah, it sounds, I mean, that just sounds amazing. And I suppose just thinking around what does the patient feel? Do you see a difference in how the patient is? How is he doing?
So one of the big drivers for this whole project was for this particular patient's quality of life. Probably should have mentioned that sooner, but yeah, that is my whole driver. Was I wanted this patient's quality of life to increase so that we could look at stepping him down the security levels, because he no longer necessarily requires the high secure service that we provide, but finding a medium secure step down service that could take a patient who had been in segregation for such a long period would be very, very difficult. So for this guy's life to improve, we needed to make him feel comfortable, build his self-esteem up, let him know that his safety and security wasn't based purely on the lock on the door, but his actual room was his safe area, and we would respect that. So he fully understands that he is safe when he is in his room, so he's maintained that level of safety, and all we've done is remove that lock. This gives him freedom of choice as well. So if he chooses to come out of his room now, he's not having to wait to an allotted time. He can just choose to come out of his room as and when he wishes. So that's increasing his opportunities. Due to the autism, sometimes he doesn't understand the security or procedures. So we'd had quite a lot of restrictions that he didn't understand, whereas now those restrictions have been released. He's much more comfortable because he can make decisions as and when he chooses. So we do see him integrating with other peers on the ward, which, again, something I never thought we'd experience. And the other peers, in turn, are feeling more comfortable and confident around him and engaging in conversations with him. So his quality of life has definitely seen an increase, as well as the reduction in the restrictions.
Oh, brilliant. That sounds like there's been loads of thinking about kind of mindset changes with staff, helped that kind of all that. And then just thinking around what your aim was at the beginning and how it changed now. It's almost like and then you're going, well, actually, what's the next step? What's the next step? And you talked around the 3 months, the next 6 months, and that end goal of actually moving him on from the services and things like that. So like you say, that just sounds like the project's been such a successful thing, and a credit to you and your team, really, Sarah. It sounds really good. Good work.
Thank you.
That's
we're hoping that we can roll it out for other patients as well. So maybe with just a few individual tweaks, obviously, to make it more specific to different patients' needs, we could maybe look at rolling out a similar system to assist other patients to reduce their restrictions as well. That would be amazing if we could actually make this work more rather than just this one-off. That would be amazing.
Not just that sounds like not just on Aintree, but again within the hospital as well. So that sounds really good. Well, thanks ever so much for joining us today, Sarah. I really appreciate it, and congrats with everything you've done. All right.
Thank you for all the support. It's a massive help. It really is.
That's okay. No problems. All right. We're always here for you. All right. Okay. Thanks ever so much. Take care now.
Cheers now. Thank you.